You're tuned into the Spot Up Pod, the official podcast of the Spot Up Shot newsletter. I'm your host, Paul Garcia. In today's episode, the Spurs went 2-1 against three quality opponents this past week to close out their homestand. Going through a bunch of topics regarding Stephon Castle's improved three-point accuracy, De'Aaron Fox's playmaking increase, and different Spurs lineups. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Spot Up Pod. Let's go through the three games for this past week for the San Antonio Spurs, where they went 2-1. So let's go back to Tuesday. The Spurs are at home hosting the Boston Celtics. The Spurs were favored by 3.5 points. There was no Harrison Barnes for San Antonio, and the Celtics were also missing Nikola Vucevic and Peyton Pritchard. And then the game did take sort of a damper in the second quarter when Jaylen Brown ended up getting ejected from the game. He got upset after a call that wasn't called, where he thought that he got pushed out of bounds by Stephon Castle. Actually, at the end of the game, the refs actually said that it wasn't a foul on Castle. But anyway, in the heat of the moment, Brown basically got upset with one of the referees. That first referee teed him up. Then Brown, started walking toward that referee again. And then the second referee teed him up, which two technicals equals an ejection. So it did kind of put out a damper on this game because obviously, the Spurs and Celtics were close to being full strength, and obviously having two MVP candidates in Jaylen Brown and Wemby, going at it in that game would have been really fun to watch. But, again, Brown did get ejected from the game. So it was a close game, though, going forward. The Spurs did start to pull away, though, in the fourth quarter. They led by as many as 13 points. But then Boston did get the game to crunch time for at least one possession. However, the Spurs did hold on by 9 points. This was more of like a three-point shootout, with both teams combining for almost 100 three-point attempts. It was just basically both teams trying to keep their opponent out of the paint. And then Boston, that's just what they're known for, is this like three-point shooting contest. And then the Spurs kind of got in that with them, kind of taking a lot of threes as well on their end in that game. But the Spurs did hold on for a 9-point win. Let's look at the top three Spurs from this game. Victor Wembanyama goes off with 39 points, 11 rebounds, 2 blocks, 1 steal, and 6 turnovers in 37 minutes. He matched his career high of 8 made threes for the second time, going 8 of 15 from 3, because that was one of the things Boston would rather live with, was Wemby taking threes rather than him, punish them inside and getting offensive boards and, easy rim attempts. So he ends up taking a bunch of threes, and he makes Boston pay, for leaving it from him open on some of those pick and pops and space out threes, where he makes 8 of 15. De'Aaron Fox had another good game against another good team with 25 points and 9 assists. He scored 16 paint points in 35 minutes. At this point, this was the fourth game in a row where Fox had reached double-digit paint points, and I do feel that's when he's at his most dangerous, when he's able to score inside. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that streak has continued for Fox, where he's been scoring in the paint. Stephon Castle was the third go-to Spur for San Antonio, ends up with 18 points, 9 rebounds, 6 assists, also went 3 of 8 from 3. And this was also marked consecutive games where Castle made at least 3 threes in 3 straight games. And I will be talking about Castle's improvement in his three-point shot a little bit later in this episode. So the Spurs take care of business and defeat Boston, a team that San Antonio was favored against by 3.5. Now let's go to Thursday. The Spurs are still at home hosting the Denver Nuggets. I was in town for this game. At the game, I had a lot of fun, catching up with a bunch of my media friends there. And I was excited to see Wemby, but he was questionable to play in this game. Coach Johnson had said basically he was like 50-50 whether he was going to play. It depended on his pregame workout. So I was actually there. I got some video of Wemby, in his pregame workout. But one thing that was noticeable, because he was, he came in with an ankle soreness injury, I believe it was, and he did have some ankle braces on, there in the warm-up. So then a few minutes later, the Spurs put out their injury report, and they did say that Wemby would miss this game. So even without Wemby, the Spurs were still favored by 2.5 points. So the Spurs were without Wemby, and then the Nuggets were without Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson. The Spurs still, even against without Wemby, they came out, firing on all cylinders, having a huge lead, going up by as many as 20 points in the first half. But then their defense really fell apart in that second half, where Denver scored 41 points in the third quarter and then 42 points in the fourth. And so the Spurs did end up losing by 5 points in crunch time. Denver went on a 14-0 run there, toward the end of crunch time, to kind of put a gap between them and the Spurs. And for the Spurs, It was their first time dropping a game this season when they were leading by 20 points. They had been undefeated up until that game against the Nuggets. The Spurs' top 3 players in this game were Stephon Castle, ends up with the 30-point triple-double, 30 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, and he also made 4 straight threes for the first time in his 4 straight threes. I don't know why I wrote that down, so I'd have to look at the box score. Anyway, Castle had another good shooting night from 3, obviously, is why I wrote that down for some reason. Anyway, De'Aaron Fox also had a good game, another good game against another good team. I got to give Fox credit here because a few weeks ago on one of the episodes I had mentioned how his numbers had taken a hit against the good teams, the good quality teams, and now lately during this homestand for the Spurs, Fox has been one of the go-to players. Really taking his game to another level against some of these top teams in the league. So Fox ends up with 27 points and 9 assists. It was also now his 5th time scoring double-digit paint points, the most of all season. So he had never gone 5 straight games this season, scoring 10 or more paint points in a row. Even when he was playing his best in like late November, early December, when Wemby was out, he hadn't even done that feat. So now it shows the consistency where Fox has been living in the paint. All right, and then Harrison Barnes came back from his injury absence after missing a few games, with an ankle injury. He ends up having a strong game off the bench with 20 points and 7 rebounds in his first game back from injury. And so what I will say about the Spurs and Nuggets, because we have now seen 2 games with these 2 teams against each other, one back in November when the Spurs won in Denver, where they made a big comeback. I think it was an 18-point comeback. And then, of course, we saw this game in San Antonio where Denver was the one who were trailing by 20 points, and then they came back and made a comeback. Is that it's tough to get a feel for this series just because some really key players, specifically Wemby, has not been present for either matchup. Obviously, one of the things I noted is, as I kind of looked at the 2 games, kind of what's going on here, but it's definitely the Spurs' defense. Even without Wemby, they're able to score enough points against Denver in these 2 matchups, but it's really the defense. They really take a hit in different areas that they don't normally have trouble with, which is paint scoring for Denver. Goes up pretty well against the Spurs. Obviously, you have Jokic, you have Murray going inside. Free throw visits, that's one issue, was that Denver really got to the free throw line in both games against San Antonio, more than San Antonio usually allows. And that was one thing that De'Aaron Fox mentioned, was that in that third quarter, the Spurs right away got themselves in trouble by letting Denver get into the bonus pretty early in that third quarter, and that's what led to those 41 points for Denver. Also with Jokic's offensive rebounding, sometimes it depends also who else is out there with Denver. They can attack you on the set with the second chance points. And then one thing to note is that both games the Nuggets scored 136 points, which is the most the Spurs have allowed this season. So both of the opponent's season highs in scoring against San Antonio have been by the Denver Nuggets in those 2 games. But again, Victor has not been present, and also I want to know that Aaron Gordon wasn't there for that last one. So again, we haven't seen these two teams at full strength, and it'll be interesting if we can kind of get a preview of that. They have 2 more games coming up here before the end of the season, because obviously this could be a potential round 2 matchup, or even a Western Conference Finals matchup if both of these teams go pretty far. So again, that's why even though yes, it is concerning that the Spurs are having major defensive issues against Denver, we also have to acknowledge that their best defensive player has not been there in either of these 2 games. All right, and then on Saturday, to close out the week, the Spurs were at home still, hosting the Charlotte Hornets in an early afternoon game. Again, I was there in attendance to watch this game, and luckily, Victor was ready to play in this one. He took off his ankle. He didn't have those ankle braces on for himself in pregame warmups, so I was able to get some video, and he looked fine, warming up. And then the Spurs, of course, announced a little bit later that he would play. So with Victor present, the Spurs were favored by 6.5 points. The Hornets had their entire team pretty much. They had most of their core rotation players. However, the Spurs were without Dylan Harper, who in that Denver game, I forgot to mention this, there was a play, I believe it was in the second quarter, where he went up for like a layup, and then he kind of came down, kind of like in hobbling a little bit. And I remember he checked himself out of the game. And then later on, though, he did come back and finish the game. So, it definitely looked like a calf injury. Well, then against the Hornets, the Spurs did announce that he was out with a calf contusion injury, a right calf contusion. And so he did miss this game, Dylan Harper. One thing to note about Harper being a rookie is that, for postseason awards for rookies such as all rookie teams or rookie of the year, the 65 game limit rule does not apply to those different awards. So even though Harper's probably not going to win rookie of the year, it's going to be either Con Knippel or Cooper Flagg, he really has a good shot at getting all rookie team, first team all rookie, I think. And so I think that he'd still, even if he has to miss a few more games here, he's okay. That 65 game rule doesn't apply to him. And he actually hasn't even met that rule. I mean, that criteria, missed that many games, should I say, so far this season. So this game did get close a few times after the Spurs did lead by as much much as 18 points, but the Spurs' defense really held the Hornets, locked them down, and that's very notable because the Hornets have been the best offense in the NBA since Christmas time, and that was very notable, the fact that the Spurs held them below 25 points in 3 of the 4 quarters, and then plus in the fourth specifically, they really clamped down on Charlotte, where the Hornets only scored 19 points, and the Spurs ended up winning by 13. There was all these videos of Wemby, just like how Hornets players drive inside. They want no business with him there, lurking inside, and so they just go back out. And we also saw a lot more French vanilla as well with Wemby and Luke Kornet. And the Spurs, again, they really shut down the paint from Charlotte, and Charlotte likes to shoot threes. They shot a lot of threes. They won the three-point line, but it wasn't enough to overcome the Spurs dominating inside and really taking away the paint from Charlotte. There was one top Spur for this game. That was Victor Wembanyama, who had an all-NBA level game with 32 points, 12 rebounds, 4 blocks, 2 steals in 31 minutes. And like I said, he was back from that ankle injury. He didn't have any ankle braces on in this game. And of course, he had a really good afternoon there with the Spurs getting a win. So the Spurs did go 2-1 this past week, with that loss to Denver being the only one that sticks out. My prediction was 3-0. I think if Wemby would have played, they probably would have gone 3-0. Vegas also said they should have gone 3-0, but again, that's still pretty good. The fact that you can go 2-1 and they actually held a 20-point lead on Denver even without Victor. So, basically this caps off that 6-game homestand for the Spurs, and they did very well. Look at these teams that they played, all playoff-bound teams right now. The Detroit Pistons win. Los Angeles Clippers, they came back from 25-1. Houston Rockets, they defeated them. Boston Celtics, they defeated them as well, even though, of course, it had a little bit of a damper with Jaylen Brown getting ejected. Denver Nuggets, they barely lost that one in crunch time, considering that Wemby wasn't there. And then Charlotte, they beat them pretty comfortably by 13 points. So again, the Spurs went 5-1 on this home game, on the 6-game homestand after returning from the rodeo road trip against very good quality opponents. So again, that's very notable that just goes on the resume for the Spurs in this season, just how much they've had a good record against some really good quality teams. All right, now for my second topic, I just kind of want to go through a few like lightning round topics, just different things that have been happening in these last few games for the Spurs, that I kind of just want to dive into a little bit here. So I won't spend too much time on all of them in detail, and then so let's just go through them. Here we go. The first one is Stephon Castle's outside shooting. So I wasn't aware of this. I was in one of the press conferences. I believe it was the one against the Nuggets in pregame, and Jared Weiss of The Athletic had mentioned to Mitch Johnson, the head coach of the Spurs, that Steph Castle was shooting like 40% since the All-Star break or something, and he actually is. He's shooting like 41%. Anyway, that got me wondering, like, man, he's actually shooting that well. I just haven't looked at it because every time I look at just the overall percentages, Castle's still down there at the bottom 30s. He's at 31% right now. So what I wanted to do is I really wanted to figure out, when has this transformation taken place in terms of him, shooting a lot better from threes, and exactly what's going on here. So here's some of the data that I pulled. When I looked at kind of like Cleaning the Glass has a cool thing where they put like a graph of like a player, and basically he started going above season average pretty much right around February is the kind of the timeline that I saw. So that's what I wanted to look at. I wanted to see, what does Castle's 3-point numbers look like before the start? From the start of the season to the end of January 31st, and then from February 1st all the way to today. And the data that I collected was as of March 14th. So for the season, he's taking for that first part of the season, he was taking 3.8 3-point attempts, low volume shooter. He was making 28% of them in 39 games. Since February, his attempts have slightly gone down to 3.2, so almost the same amount of attempts, again, low volume, but his accuracy has gone up 10% to 38.6% in 18 games. Again, that's a pretty good sample size there, 18-game sample size, 38%. Here's what I basically broke down his 3-point shooting in those two segments between his corner attempts, his arc 3 attempts, his wide open threes, his open threes, his catch and shoot threes, and pull up threes. And I'm not gonna go through all the data. I'll put it online. On video if you all want to see the numbers in detail. But here were my big takeaways in analyzing these two timelines. What I noticed is that he's getting more he's taking more corner threes. So basically, before February 1st, he was only taking 0.8 corner threes attempts per game, and he was struggling. He was shooting 27%. Now, though, he's increased his corner threes from February onward to 1.2 attempts, and he's making 38% of them. So again, if you can get corner threes, that's a much better shot because it is a closer 3-point distance. It's only 22 feet, whereas the arc three is 23.9 feet. So again, he's actually increased his corner threes. He's knowing where to go when he's off the ball, how to get himself set up in the corner, and he knows that defenses are going to leave him wide open, and so he's taking advantage if the ball's getting to him there in the corners, and he's making the most of those attempts, making 38% of his corner threes since February. His arc threes have gone down by just one, basically. So he's basically, sacrificing one of those arc threes, those further threes, and instead increasing his corner threes. So he's gone from 3 attempts from the arc to now just 2 attempts. Also shooting well, though. I will give him credit. He's gone from 29% on arc threes to now 39% in this latest sample size. All of his threes are pretty much still wide open. Before February, he was getting 3 attempts wide open, shooting 32%. Lately, he's getting 2.4 attempts wide open, shooting 35%. His open threes, when a defender's 2 to 4 feet away, he's getting the exact same amount of attempts, 0.8, but he's shooting much better. He's shooting 50%. Before, he was shooting 16%. And then look at his catch and shoot numbers. His catch and shoot number threes are still pretty much the same. He was at 2.8 before and now 2.9 after, so just a 0.1 increase. But look at his accuracy. He went from shooting 31.9% to now shooting 41.5%, so almost 42% on catch and shoot threes. And here's one of the biggest changes for him. He has taken out the pull-up three out of his shot diet, and obviously that's a shot that, when defenses are backing off someone and they're just basically daring you to just step into that shot and take it. That can be the only shot that might be there for you. But he's been really a lot more disciplined and not going for that shot, considering that defenses are going under on screens and giving him that shot. They're saying basically take this shot, and he's not doing that. So here's what the data says. Before February 1st, he was taking 1 pull-up 3 a game, and he was shooting 19% on those shots. Again, 18.6%. Since February, though, he's taken 0.2 attempts. So again, basically just got that shot out of his diet, and he hasn't made one since February. But still, the fact that he's basically not taking them anymore is a really good sign that he's only settling for those catch and shoot threes and primarily those corner threes. So I think that's a big part of it. Is yes, you give him credit because his accuracy has improved. So that just shows on him that he's made this big leap in these last 18 games, but then also he's taking better threes, the catch and shoot threes, and also those corner attempts. So again, Castle, we'll see if how much this trend continues, because again, it's only an 18 game sample size, whereas the other sample size was 39 games. And this is going to be very important because, as we've seen some defenses do, and I think they're going to do it more deliberately in the playoffs, they're going to put their bigs on him. And I saw the Rockets do this last Sunday, where they were putting Alperen Şengün as his primarily matchup. Now Castle did a great job of still being able to come around the screen really hard and aggressive and still get to the paint, or if the open three is there for him, he's ready to take it. So again, I think that in the playoffs, teams are going to put their bigs on him a lot more, and then they're going to leave him wide open even more to kind of congest the paint or really send traps at Wemby. And so will he be ready to hit those shots? And if he's getting those open corner threes, this is a good sign right now that he's shooting really well right now lately, on these corner attempts and these catch and shoot threes. All right, next up for this lightning round, I just want to talk about De'Aaron Fox's playmaking increase in the last 6 games. Again, against all these quality teams: Detroit, the Clippers, Houston, Boston, Denver, Charlotte. So I noticed this because what I really focus on whenever I do my my post game stats and stuff like that, I really look at the players' points for like Castle, Harper, Fox, Wemby. I really pay attention to how much they're scoring in the paint, and normally Fox only scores 8.7 points per game in the paint. Again, he doesn't usually get over 10 points, consistently in there. And again, I think that Fox is at his best and at his most dangerous to a defense whenever he's living in the paint. Scoring, whether it's his pull-up floater, his paint jumper, or just getting right to the rim and finishing with dunks or layups. So let's just look at these 2 different sample sizes. Full season versus the last 6 games. So for the season, he's averaging 19 points per game. In the last 6 games, he's averaging 22.8 points per game. His assists have gone up, 6.3 assists. Now he's averaging 7.3 assists. Shots have gone up. Normally he averages 15 shots a game. Lately he's averaging 17 shots a game. So again, a little bit more aggressive in taking shots. Accuracy has gone up. From the field, he's shooting 49% for the season. Last 6 games, 55%. Free throws are a little bit off, but barely. For the season, he's at 3.6 free throw attempts. Right now, he's at 3 free throw attempts in his last 6. His accuracy from the free throw line has had trouble, from 75% for the season versus 56% in these last 6. His three-point shot has gone up a little bit more, from 5.6 three-point attempts in the season to 6.5 in the last 6 games, but his accuracy has gone down from 35% to 33%. But again, he's still shooting better from the floor and scoring more right now because, again, he's more so living inside that 2-point range area. His turnovers have also gone down from 2.3 turnovers for the season versus 1.8 in the last 6 games. And here's one of the key numbers that I really focus on, and I'm really going to watch this number in the playoffs. Fox's usage rate. For the season, he has the 3rd usage rate on the team at 24.2% behind Wemby and Stephon Castle. In these last 6 games, though, he's got a usage rate of 25.7%. So it's gone up right now in these last 6, and he's second now behind Wemby. And Castle's the one who's kind of seen a little bit drawback in his playmaking, down to 21% in these last 6. So again, I think that for the Spurs to be at their best in the playoffs, they got to have that first. Obviously, they're going to have their 3 go-to guys, which are Wemby, Fox, and Castle. But I think it's got to be in that order. It's got to be Wemby, then Fox, then Castle, and for the Spurs to kind of be at their best in the playoffs and be at their most dangerous. So again, I'm really eager to see if this translates this usage rate into the playoffs. And here's just his game score difference, which kind of, again, takes all the box score numbers and kind of spits out a number. And so basically, his game score for the season is 15.2, which is basically like right at that limit. A 15 game score is like basically being well above average. But again, he's kind of between being above average and well above average, right on the line there. In these last 6 games, though, his game score is at 19.1. So basically, if he were to get that game score up to a 20 or higher, he's basically playing at an all-star level. So again, he's still playing well above average basketball lately, but he's almost like on the cusp of being at that all-star level. And so that's kind of, in some of these games, he's actually put up some all-star numbers alongside Wemby. So again, I think that Fox has really shown a big difference here. And let me just talk about his paint scoring. For the season, he averages 8.7 points per game in the paint. In these last 6, though, he's averaging 12.7 points per game. Again, double digits, and he scored double-digit paint points in 6 of all 6 of his last games, basically in that homestand. And that's the first time all season that he's ever averaged double-digit paint points in 6 straight games. So again, I just feel like the ball's running a little bit more. The offense is running a little bit more through Fox right now, and he's getting to create for himself and others, as I wrote about in a piece earlier this week. And I really feel like this may not maintain for the rest of this season in these final 15 games, but if they can do this in the playoffs where Fox sees a little bit increase of his usage and a lot more of the offense is running through him and Victor, of course, then I think that's when the Spurs can really be at their most dangerous, is with Fox, being more so at that all-star level for himself. All right, so for this final, lightning round, I guess, topic or conversation here, I want to look at some different Spurs lineups. So obviously, if you watched that Denver game, you saw that the Spurs played a lot more small ball with Wemby out. So Luke Kornet started at center. Then they would have, Mason Plumlee got some minutes, but then they would have lineups where like Keldon Johnson was guarding Nikola Jokic, Carter Bryant was guarding Jokic, and then they had Harrison Barnes in those kind of lineups as well. And so, and then like we go back to that Clippers game, I remember, even though Wemby and Luke Kornet were both available, I remember the Spurs, in order to make that 25-point comeback in the fourth quarter, they actually went to a lot more small ball, where Carter Bryant and Keldon were playing more like small ball center position, and just moving around in that zone defense. So what I wanted to do was just kind of look at different lineups without Victor and Luke out there, with specific players in there. So let's so that I went to Cleaning the Glass for this data. So with Carter Bryant on the floor, Keldon Johnson and Harrison Barnes all out there together, kind of that really micro small ball. The Spurs have used that trio in 79 possessions per Cleaning the Glass, and this is actually a pretty good lineup where they have a plus 21 net rating. They have a 135.4 points per 100 possession offense, which is 100th percentile, and a pretty good defense, 60th percentile, allowing 114.5 points per 100. So again, if Keldon, Bryant and Barnes are in a lineup together in a small ball, that's actually it's numerically, it's smaller sample size, but it is a pretty good lineup, is what we're seeing here. And of course, Keldon or Bryant guards, whoever the big is, and then you just have a bunch of more rotating and shuffling and zone kind of looks. Let's look at Harrison Barnes and Keldon together, just those two players in a small ball lineup. That is not a good lineup. There might be some Bismack Biyombo in this data and some Kelly Olynyk as well. So this is not a good lineup. They've actually run these two players together a lot, 291 possessions, and they have a minus 15.2 net rating. Again, very bad. Offense is okay. It's at 63rd percentile, but defense is really bad, allowing 132.1 points per 100. So again, the defense is getting shredded, 0 percentile. Keldon Johnson and Carter Bryant out there together in a small ball lineup. They're allowing. They've played this lineup. Pretty decent as well. 129 possessions. It's not very good as well. It's a minus 7.6 net rating. Offensively, very bad. 104.7 points per 100, which is 3rd percentile. Defensively, pretty good. 112.2 points per 100. So again, I attribute that probably more to zone looks. The Harrison Barnes and Carter Bryant together lineup, that one has not played at all much. That lineup, they've only been on the floor together 7 possessions, and it's very bad, minus 150 net rating. But again, it's only 7 possessions. And then so again, if Bryant, Keldon, and Barnes are out there together, it looks pretty decent. If the three of them are out there, because I think they have like a lot more size, not size, but shifting ability where they can play a little bit more zone, even though there's not really a lot of rim protection out there. But that lineup looks pretty decent if the Spurs had to experiment with it. So again, I feel like they've just been experimenting because Wemby was out that night against Denver. They also used, like I said, they went to a small ball lineup against the Clippers as well. So again, I feel like they're trying some of these small ball lineups just to kind of see what they have for the postseason in case they do need to go small ball instead of having either Victor or maybe not having Kornet in the game at all. And then the Spurs did play some French vanilla lineup against the Charlotte Hornets, and that worked out pretty well for them. Saw Wemby throwing some lobs to Luke Kornet, and obviously the Hornets were held to 30 paint points in this game. And so I just wanted to see what that number looks like for the season. They've now played 195 possessions together, Victor and Luke. They're basically right. It's barely a losing lineup at minus 1.8. I feel like when I last looked up these numbers, it was worse. So that's actually pretty good that they're almost right there at being neutral. Their offense is pretty bad though. Still, they're scoring 106.7 points per 100, which is in the 6th percentile, not very good. But their defense remains elite, having Victor and a Kornet out there together, allowing only 108.5 points per 100, which is the 92nd percentile. Again, elite defense with those two bigs together. So again, that was just something I want to look at because I know that was one of the conversations that was going on the last few days with the Spurs losing to the Nuggets was how they went to small ball. And I just want to look at who in their small ball when they're out there on the floor, what do the numbers look like? And obviously when Keldon, Carter, and Harrison are out there, it's a smaller sample size, but they're actually pretty decent. But then when it's Keldon and Barnes, not very good. When it's Keldon and Bryant, not good at all either. And then Bryant and Barnes, very much not good. All right, for our final topic, let's preview the upcoming games for this week. So it's going to be a busy week for the Spurs. They have 4 games coming up, 2 road games, 2 home games. So let's just talk about the Spurs are doing their last 10 because that's where I like to evaluate these teams. So the Spurs are 8-2, playing very good basketball. They have the 3rd best offense during the stretch, the 8th best defense, and the 5th best net rating. So on Monday, they're on the road at Los Angeles to play the Clippers. This will be their first time playing on the road in LA. The Clippers are playing good basketball. They're 7-3 in their last 10, although the Spurs are one of those losses in that 3-game loss column. The Clippers are rolling offensively. They have the 2nd best offense during the stretch and 13th ranked defense. They have the 7th best net rating during the stretch. So Kawhi Leonard is doubtful. I do want to say that. And the Spurs will also be without Dylan Harper, who has that contusion, that calf contusion, and Luke Kornet. I believe Kornet's is right knee soreness or ankle soreness, something with one of his legs injured. So he's going to be out. So the Spurs won't have Harper or Kornet. But again, Kawhi is doubtful. I know he had to leave a game recently. I think it was on Saturday night, and he didn't return in the 4th quarter. Even if Kawhi does play, I'm gonna go ahead and pick the Spurs because again, I don't think that Kawhi will play. The fact that he's doubtful and the fact that he left the game early the other night, so I'm gonna go ahead and say that the Spurs win this one. But I am actually hoping that Kawhi plays because I really feel like this is gonna be a very interesting matchup because right now it could be the circumstance where the Spurs play the Clippers in round 1 of the playoffs. If the Clippers win their playing tournament game as a 7 versus 8 matchup, they could be the 2 versus 7 seed. And again, that would be just an interesting series because we've only got one game where the Clippers were actually the better team for most of that game. They were up by 25 on the Spurs, at full strength, the Spurs team. And then, of course, the Spurs made that big comeback. So, again, and that was in San Antonio, although I will say it was on the second night of a back-to-back for the Spurs. But still, I really feel like I'm hoping that we get as much of seeing these two teams at whole before the playoffs arrive to see, in case this is a round one matchup. I also will note that John Collins should be present for this game after he missed the game in San Antonio last week. Then on Tuesday, the Spurs are on the second out of back-to-back in Sacramento against the Kings. The Kings are actually playing much better basketball than when the Spurs, blew them out in Austin a few weeks ago. The Kings are 5-5 in their last 10 games. They have the 19th ranked offense during the stretch and 21st ranked defense. They also have the 19th ranked net rating during the stretch. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Spurs, even though the Kings are playing better basketball. And it's more so because, again, even though the Kings are playing better basketball right now, they still have the 21st ranked defense. Again, if you have a bad defense and you're going to let San Antonio do whatever they want on offense, like get to the places that they want to get in the paint and kick out or score there at the rim, then I feel like, I'm going to go ahead and take the Spurs. Then on Thursday, the Spurs return home to host the Phoenix Suns. The Suns are 6-4, again, playing good basketball in the last 10. They have the 17th ranked offense during the stretch and 12th ranked defense. Net rating, they're 14th during the stretch, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Spurs because the game is at home. I'm not sure yet if Dylan Brooks will be back. I don't think he will quite yet for that game, even though Jalen Green and Devin Booker have been playing really well together out there for the Suns. But again, I'm going to go ahead and take San Antonio in this game. And then on Saturday, the Spurs close out the week with a game hosting the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers are struggling right now. As of when I collected this data, as of Sunday afternoon, they were on. They had lost 10 games in a row, or they were 0-10 in their last 10. I'm not even sure how much games they're losing, what their winning streak is like. Let me actually look real quick. I should have done this in my podcast notes. Pacers, what kind of losing streak are y'all on? Oh, 13-game losing streak. Okay, Pacers are on a 13-game losing streak as I record this on now it's 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So again, they're 0-10 in the last 10. That's the data I'm using. They have the 26th ranked offense during the stretch and the worst defense in the league during the stretch, and they have the worst net rating in the league during the stretch, getting blown out by 15.7 points per 100. So of course, I'm going to go ahead and take the Spurs. So this looks like a very favorable schedule for the Spurs. I think they're going to end up going 4-0 here is my prediction. I think Vegas will also predict that they go 4-0, and we'll see how they do. And it wouldn't surprise me. The Spurs, even though they haven't quite locked up number 2 out west or an actual playoff seed in the top 6, they're basically on path to get those seeds. It would take a lot for those other teams behind them to catch up. So really, they've kind of got those 2 spots locked up essentially, even though mathematically I might not say it. So again, I could see situations like with Luke Kornet's injury where he's out, where maybe some of the guys who are not as far from meeting the award criteria, where they have some room to miss games. I could see in these final 15 games, the Spurs start to rest some players here, or let them, if there's just some small injury bugging them, have those players sit out here. There's no need to have these players play all these last final 15 games outside of Wemby, who of course is right there on the cusp. I think he can only miss 3.5 games now going forward after missing that game against Denver. So outside of Wemby, I could see situations where maybe there's a small injury bugging a Spurs player in the rotation, and maybe that player sits out here in these final 15 games because, like I said, it's pretty soon here the Spurs are going to lock up 2-6, and they essentially have those spots locked up as of right now when we look at the projections for the teams behind them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of the Spot Up Pod. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a rating on your favorite podcast apps and our YouTube channel. The Spot Up Pod is recorded and produced by Paul Garcia. The music for this episode was written by Vincent Garcia and Paul Garcia. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.